All right, so welcome everyone. You are here for the 2022 July Earth Science Information Partners ESIP Meeting Highlights webinar. My name is Allison Mills. I'm our communications manager here at ESIP. And this is a webinar that highlights all of the key events of our meeting from many different perspectives. So we'll be hearing from a lot of people today. And you'll hear from ESIP leaders, session organizers, our community fellows, as well as from a few of us staff. So we invite you to get involved in one or more efforts that you see highlighted here, and we're going to offer you some ways to do that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on in. If you do have any questions, just some logistical things, feel free to pop them into the chat. You're not going to be able to unmute yourself unless you're one of the presenters today. And we're really looking forward to spending the next bit of time with you. So first things first, we can go ahead and go on to the next slide, Annie. So let's set the big picture here. So ESIP hosts 2 large conference style meetings each year in January and July. So we just had our July meeting. And these are opportunities for individuals and organizations to connect, to collaborate, and we're working across many different sectors and across the entire data life cycle. And these meetings are one of the ways that ESIP helps earth science data professionals to find each other, work together, and leverage each other's collective expertise to make progress on common data challenges and opportunities. And ultimately, we do that because we want to make earth science data more discoverable, accessible, and useful to researchers, practitioners, policymakers, and various publics. So let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. And this year, we centered that conversation around the theme data for all people. And so what that really means is that we're really passionate about making sure that there are many different people accounted for in data generation, but also in data use and analysis too. So we know that through the sound creation, use, and management of data, we can work together for a meaningful understanding and positive change in all of our worlds. We know that by connecting people with data, we can enable and empower action on some of the world's greatest challenges. So the ESIP meeting, which was held in Pittsburgh this past July and online as well, that was from July 19th to the 22nd. It was an opportunity to engage as a community as a whole for earth science data professionals on this very important topic. So connecting data for all people. And we'd also, none of this would be possible, of course, right, without the sponsors of our meetings. So AWS was our gold level sponsor, Esri was a silver level sponsor, and Element 84 designed both our amazing lanyards, and they're just an overall friend of ESIP. So big thank you for our sponsors here. Couple of highlights from what the meeting actually looked like. It's so wonderful to see people gathering in person, but we would be remiss to not highlight our virtual gathering as well. So let's break that down by the numbers. Yes, one of the drone photos did come out. You're right, Denise. So meeting by the numbers, we had 3 plenary sessions, 36 research showcase presentations, and 35 breakout sessions. And in terms of the number of folks, we had 332 total attendees. That's including 137 first-timers, which is a huge part of the group. And about 1/3 of the folks who had signed up were virtual. So 2/3 in person, 1/3 online. And we also had over 100 people who served as either organizers or speakers. And ESIP is definitely a very community-driven organization, and that really shows in our big gatherings. Now, our hybrid format would only have been possible with some of the technology we used. So next slide, Annie. So we used Sketch as a way to keep literally all of us on schedule. We used Zoom for recording and sharing all of the in-person and virtual attendance. And we also used Slido, Kiko Chat, the ESIP Figshare repository, and a Google Suite as well. So our breakout session organizers also took part in session facilitation training led by the fabulous master facilitator Charlie Haley. And this was ahead of the meeting so that we could plan out our sessions. And yet again, it showed that the training was really helpful. Next slide. So now that the meeting has wrapped up, you can find all of this good stuff. So we've asked our presenters to contribute their presentations to the ESIP Figshare report, the ESIP Figshare portal. And then you can use the URLs on the bottom of this slide here if you would like to go to both the Figshare repository and to Schedge, where you will find the Zoom recordings and the notes documents from all of the materials. Next slide. And we do have everything up on YouTube. So we've got a big old playlist. We've got the short URL here, esipfed.org/July22-videos. So if you wanted to catch up on any of the presentations and watch the full presentation that you hear today, you can do so. We'll have it all up online. So let's dive into the big picture stuff, our really big presentations that we had. We had 3 different plenaries. So we're going to dive into the opening plenary, our Wednesday lab plenary, and our Friday closing plenary as well. All right, so Denise, you're up first.
Thanks. How can I follow such fabulous looking slides and such great work from Allison and all of the staff at ESIP? One of the things about planning this in-person meeting is that we really wanted to be joyful in our welcome to our first in-person meeting since January of 2020. It truly was joyful. You know, and Susan opened up our plenary, reiterating that, and welcomed us all to Pittsburgh, reminded us why we were there. Ken gave us some great background, but really what excited me so much about this open plenary was it really did kind of bring into that focus of data for all people. We had 2 outstanding speakers, Rebecca Nugent from Carnegie Mellon University, and Amen Ra-Masharki, who is Mashariki, sorry, I needed my glasses on to read that name, and I didn't have them. He is a fellow with the Bezos Earth Fund. And although their talks were very different, both in style and content, there were some really common themes that came out of both of those talks that really, to me, kind of linked it back to this idea of data for all people. And it's kind of summarized in these 3 points here. How do we improve how we help others understand the data? Because different people think about data differently. Relationships is key. This is something, as I do more science policy work, science communication work, this is something I tend to really focus on, is that those relationships are what make things happen or allow things to happen. By finding those centers of trust within a community, and then you establish your governance of however you're going to do anything using those centers of trust, because you can't just come in and say, hey, I know what's best for you, because you don't. You have to listen as much or more than speak. And something that I think is really kind of summarized a little bit by the cartoon that I found to go with this, is that conversations need to start from the community rather than us pushing our ideas into them, because otherwise we may try to build a bridge when what we really need is a boat. Anyway, watch the video if you weren't there. It really was amazing. And thank you.
Yes, thanks, Denise. All right, Annie, you're up with our lab plenary.
Great. And I'm also keeping time for everyone. So I have a 2-minute timer set. This is just an FYI. And when I have the 2 minutes, I'll unmute and you'll hear a nice little tone. So just letting everyone know. So thanks so much, Allison. On Wednesday morning, we had the ESIP Lab plenary featuring 2 fabulous speakers, Renee Sieber, who is at McGill University, and Margaret Hu, who's at the William and Mary Law School. And you can see from my two little boxes, kind of what I saw as some of the primary highlights from their talk. I'm going to be quiet for 5 to 10 seconds so you can all read the text on the left, since it's hard to listen and read. So I'm going to look at my clock, and I'd love you to all read the text there. All right. So hopefully you were able to see what Renee was speaking about in her talk. First and foremost, that opening data is a political act and engineering data is a political act. And she really spoke a lot about when we say data for all people, she spoke both what is data, who is the all. I mean, she got pretty meta in a cool way of breaking down our theme and having everyone in the plenary really think hard about the who and what we're really referring to in the data for all people. Margaret Hu spoke a lot about privacy and data, and she kind of framed it as the European Union is currently using a risk-based approach for regulating their AI. And she broke it down between facial recognition, what the potential impacts are of that. And when she spoke about it in relation to the EU, it was, what is a low risk AI? What is a high risk, and what's unacceptable risk? And having us think about, as people that are designing and using AI and machine learning, to think about where would our data fall into this low, high, and unacceptable risk categories. I think both of their talks were a little bit of a pivot from what we often hear at ESIP plenaries. And I was really excited to have them as our in-person lab plenaries. And that's what the timer sounds like, friends.
Great. Well, I'm up next. So I'm talking about our closing plenary, which was with Colette Brown, who is our Raskin Scholar this year, and Ryan Abernathy, who is the 2021 Falkenberg Award winner, which is a co-award between AGU and ESIP. So I'm not just going to read the slide. You're welcome to dive into the words there if you want. Both of them gave great, very personal presentations and dove into some pretty big topics, which was fantastic. Colette in particular, her enthusiasm for everything was just very contagious, and I wanted to go research in Alaska with her, and I really felt like the commentary that she offered, particularly about how to include Indigenous partners in research, was really important in emphasizing permission and transparency in that work. And then Ryan's talk, was a pivot to open science, and I think it's some of the best use of emojis that I've seen in a while, which was pretty cool. And I think that, his talk really got at the heart of what ESIP and many other organizations, not many actually, only a few of us really, so ESIP and maybe PANGEO and EDGI and a handful of us who really care about data accessibility and the technical aspects of that, and what some of the technical challenges are and how to overcome them. So it was very exciting to hear both of them speak. I think we all felt pretty refreshed after hearing it. And if you would like to learn more about their work, they both wrote blogs for our ESIP blog. And so if you follow the QR code on the slide here, you will be able to dive a little deeper in their own words, which is great. So I think next we'll be shifting into our breakout sessions. And so this is actually going to be led by all of the session organizers themselves. And so first up, we've got, I think Douglas will be talking about this one. So go ahead and dive right on in.
Thanks, Allison. And here I hope you don't hear any noise from the airport. But today I'm talking about the session we lead as a mini data-a-thon, that's AI-ready climate data. And the whole goal is to bring committee members together to assess the AI readiness of a selection of the public climate data set to form a pilot collection of AI-ready data sets for the community. We have selected several data sets for people who don't have their own data set for assessment, including data from NOAA, NASA, and the USGS. So the key takeaway for this session is that the training materials are really needed for to better onboard the people who want to address the assessment for AI readiness for the community. And we got feedback about there is some confusion and how to doing the assessments. The second takeaway is that AI readiness can be a use case driven. So we need to balancing the improvements at large scale can be done and how we can meet the last mile issues of the AI readiness data for different use cases. And the last takeaway point is that we need to position AI readiness assessment as a process to guide the community to improve the future data and services for the data management and development. So it's really important to position this to make sure people are willing to do the assessment and then use this as a guideline to improve the future data. So if you're interested, feel free to contact myself, Stacy, or Pen and Kamar, and we have a mailing list, and next Telecon is coming up on September 20th.
Great, thank you very much. So next we'll be talking about a community guide for FAIR. And so I think we've got Jipeng here to give us a little more info.
Yes, this session is organized by ESIP Information Quality Cluster. And my name is Peng. I go with Peng. I'm one of the co-chairs. The goal of the session is to explore approaches and current approaches and practices that can be utilized to establish or promoting trustworthy FAIR data and repositories. And if you have not heard about FAIR, and they refer to findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And we had a packed room and plus 35 online attendees. And that's a good indication to us that the ESIP community is fairly interested in this particular subject. And we have 6 excellent invited presentations, and they demonstrate that there are a variety of approaches used for FAIR assessment. And we can help each other by sharing lessons learned and also the insight that we gain by doing the assessment. And the question that comes repeatedly is, how can fairness assessment that being conducted be used to help improve organizational data management practice and capabilities? And that can get to our path forward is to develop a community guide, help the data stores and data producers and repositories that are going to be dealing with the requirement for complying with the FAIR principles. So if you're interested in this topic or would like to learn more, and we have IQC wiki page, you can join IQC at the website. And we do have additional information at the session notes, including links to the presentations. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We've got Kathy Brown-Todd talking next, and we're bridging soil data and semantics.
All right, so this was part of a 3-part series that was an in-person session bracketed by 2 online sessions. And essentially we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do for cluster activities for the soil ontology and information cluster. And so this session was convened in conjunction with the semantic harmonization cluster. And the ask for the ESIP session was drawing on the experience of the ESIP community to envision a data connected semantics and governance model and what that might look like in soils. So some tensions that were identified in creating these semantics was balancing the need for a specific use case with general applicability, simple language with specific definitions, and uncertainty and governance questions. Sorry, I didn't quite finish that slide apparently. One of the two main outcomes from this is that we're going to continue community-focused presentations in the upcoming year, focusing on data collections instead of semantics. And then I think we're also ready for a review and synthesis manuscript, aligning the different data models with semantic resources that have been used in the community for research data collections.
Great, thank you. And if you want to follow up with any of these clusters, we've got the community calendar link in the chat. And next up, we've got Leslie, who, and I'm not biased at all, but I think this is one of the most lively sessions we had. So take it away.
Thank you, Allison. I'm Leslie Shih from the USGS, and together with Annie Burgess from ESIP and Sarah Lubkin from NASA, we co-led a session on collaboration and communication for technology infusion. What is technology infusion? It is making new technology used technology. Many of us might have technical or otherwise challenging projects that we're working on that are hard to describe to potential users. So we gave participants a chance to share their current projects with other ESIP attendees who might be future collaborators, users, or even funders. To do this, we practiced talking about our work in a way that communicates impact, avoids jargon, and invites listeners to respond for greater understanding. On the right, you can see some participant contributed stickies from our online Jamboard after our what not to do discussion. There were a lot of acronyms, jargon, lack of context, and you never want your listener to feel dumb. So next we moved on to tips for speakers and listeners for having conversations that generate understanding. A few takeaways we practiced were speakers focusing on the why and not the how of their work, speakers understanding their audience and allowing the audience space to respond and ask questions, and finally, listeners knowing that they have a responsibility to ask clarifying or guiding questions to help generate productive conversations. Get in touch with any of us if you want to learn more. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you all for, practicing this today. So I'm going to break all of that, and I'm going to segue next with an acronym. Nancy is going to spell out the DMTC for us. So Nancy.
Okay, all right, that's my first order. All right, our session, I was with Carl Benedict from University of New Mexico, and we were inviting people to give us some response to our enhancement of the data management training clearinghouse, DMTC, which many people know about already. We've started this with the help of USGS and Data One in about 2014 or so, and ESIP, of course. So we had received an IMLS, an Institute of Museum and Library Services grant, National Leadership Grant, a few years ago to do this enhancement. And so we are ready to do the soft launch about ready to do the soft launch by July. So what we did was to present what we had in terms of the different functionalities, the different capabilities of the clearinghouse, which involves searching for data resources related to data management training or other data skill building, assessing those resources as users, and also then participating in the submission and kind of metadata creation process that's part of the publication of the clearinghouse, which is a registry or portal. And we've got some, so our goals were to do the introduction and then to get some real actionable feedback, because as most people know who've been involved with this kind of thing, the soft launch, you're never ready for the soft launch. And hopefully by when there really is a launch, you're closer to what you want the product to be. So we got a lot of really good feedback from people. We had not had time to really put in the explanations for the type of information and metadata. So that was over and over again, what does this mean? How can we find out what it means, and so on. We've got the information available, but just don't have it put into the page yet. So that's our first and highest priority. Again, I forgot who else said this. I think it was Peng, or the person talking about communicating, use fewer words, make them choice words when you're trying to ask people to do something, and add space to the pages. And then we want more user feedback. So you can follow up with myself or Carl Benedict if you're interested. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, Doug Newman is up next, and he's going to be taking us into knowledge graphs, open science.
Okay, so the goal of the session was to establish some use cases that may need a new approach to knowledge graphs, i.e. federating them, having lots of different islands of knowledge graphs and being able to navigate between those islands. So a number of people gave you some use cases. Yeah.
We're getting a little bit of static from your line.
Well, that's because how's that? I actually broken the rules and taken my mask off. Don't tell anyone. Is that better?
It doesn't sound like a math, Doug. It sounds more like an issue.
Well, that's about as much as I can do about that then. Is that any better?
I say just
Just go for it. I've already bitten up most of my time. All right. So our takeaways were that usage-based discovery, which is an ESIP effort, could benefit from some usability studies and some input from outside the cluster. There were some people came in from other clusters who had some ideas about how usage-based discovery could go. I think we really need to look at what the industry is doing in terms of graph and federation. We've kind of treated it like our own thing right now, and there's probably some best practices out there that we're unaware of. And finally, that we had a very engaged audience. It was quite a full session, and they were very interested in methodologies for collection publication. The contact person, if you want to learn more, is myself. I'm Doug Newman from NASA ESDIS, and there's a link to the ESIP Discovery mailing list there. And finally, it was very cold. That was my main takeaway. Oh, this is me again. Again, it was cold. That's why I have a picture there. The second session that I worked on was the MAP session, the multi-mission algorithm and analysis platform, and looking at other spatial data infrastructures that are out there. But to be honest, it was mostly the MAP people talking about their experience. MAP is a collaboration between NASA and ESA to put together a platform for on the cloud for generating high-level products from algorithms that are iteratively developed in a collaborative environment, leveraging the cloud and new technology to do that. The takeaways were that MAP was very successful. It's a flagship NASA application. Our collaboration with ESA was very successful and could demonstrate that we can collaborate at such a grand scale. Apparently, I think Stinger figured this out. We had the largest breakout attendance in that time slot, so I'll believe him when he says that, but that suggests that it was a very engaging topic. And finally, we had experts from both ESA and the NASA side talking about architecture, about stewardship, etc. And we were able to address a large number of diverse questions about what MAP was about, and the idea that the MAP, albeit specifically geared towards biomass, could be extended towards a variety of different use cases and disciplines. And again, if you want more information on this, contact me directly, because we don't have a ESIP cluster associated with this particular topic. Thanks.
All right, so up next then, we've got Alejandro.
Thanks. Yeah, so in this session, we examined the EPA website for the Mercury and Air Toxic Standards Rule, and participants tried to find the data that was used to craft that rule. So our takeaways were that the government data, even when it's cited in a government publication can still be sometimes hard to find and use. The participants had different opinions about the website for the Mercury and Air Toxic Standards Rule. Some thought that it provided a lot of good information about the rule. Others critiqued how the website provided access to data, or rather that finding data related to the rule was borderline impossible using the website. We had an interesting discussion about linked data and the usefulness of a one-stop shop for data. And so if you look at the video, I think you'll find that fascinating. So we, the session organizers, were EDGI, the Environmental and Data Governance Initiative. And we found, I think, your feedback for this session to be extremely useful. And we hope to build on it to create more sessions or programming reports, so on, in the future that will allow us to provide a more constructive bent to our analysis to help agencies like EPA better think about how to make their data assets findable, especially those that are used to craft regulations. And just to wrap it up, I wanted to share something that someone shared in one of our polls that we did during the session. This was an anonymous poll, so unfortunately I can't say who said this, but I'm just going to repeat it. Someone wrote that the data that's used to create policies like the Mercury and Air Toxic Standards rules are not clearly defined or easily accessible to users. And that when making data open source, it's important to think about who your users are and what kind of information they will need, including how it is presented. So is it easy to understand? Are there visualizations, so on. So anyways, that was a great session. And so thank you for everyone that attended. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, next up, we've got schema.org, and Doug Phil's going to fill us in.
Hello, everyone. My name is Doug Phils. I'm presenting this on behalf of Adam Shepard, who couldn't be here today. Adam was the individual who presented this session. And this is a tutorial that was born out of the Science on Schema.org cluster and was focused on taking both the guidance that is being developed in that cluster, which is guidance around the use of the schema.org type data set, vocabulary types and properties to describe data sets using linked data. In this tutorial then, Adam stepped through the structure of a JSON LD document and how the various components of that document go into generating the resulting data graph. So these would be things like proper use of context, proper use of identifiers, and other elements in that. Through that session then, he broke down some of the basic data set or data elements that we describe in our guidance from that cluster, and then talked about some of the various levels of detail that can go into there as well. This entire tutorial is actually part now of the scienceonschema.org GitHub repository, so people can go and utilize that tutorial or elements of that tutorial as they wish. In particular, we were very interested in discussing about things such as the dataset funding, and so how to properly put in awards and elements like that. There's a lot of discussions now that have been taking place on the utilization of variables and their description inside these data graphs, and then as well as geologic time. If you want to learn more about scienceonschema.org or the JSON LD encoding that we use of RDF, please join the cluster and contact Adam Shepard for more information about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Next up, we've got Sarah Ramdeen, who is talking about the physical samples clusters presentation.
Oops, sorry, my camera actually on. Hello, everyone. So the physical samples curation cluster is focused on supporting physical samples in the earth, space, and environmental sciences. And that might be from different roles, from researcher to repository manager to cyber infrastructure developers, and even the researchers who are coming in to use these samples. Our session at ESIP this July was called Cite Your Samples. It was focused on the guidelines that we're developing for authors being presented from publishers on how you should cite your samples in your work. We're calling it colloquially the sample sharing guidelines. Part of that includes too as well advice on how to provide citations, how to reference your samples, what metadata or information you should include in your citations, where you can deposit samples and sample metadata, and other related topics that would be useful for authors when publishing about samples, and also for reviewers when reviewing journal publications. The session went really well. It was always very exciting to get everyone together in a room and work on things. There was some positive feedback to the progress we've made so far. You can take a look at the current draft by following the first link on the slide. We've also roadshowed the work we've done so far at the Research Data Alliance and at Spinach, two other communities, one global and well, both global, but one focused on data and the other focused on natural history collections. We've gotten good feedback from those communities. They are interested in perhaps adopting our guidelines once they're complete. Within the session itself, when we spent some breakout time working on the guidelines in different sections, particularly focused on how to do peer review for sample citations, and also about data availability or sample availability statements. From the discussions, we had some really good comments for recommendations that we needed to include in the guidelines. And next steps will be to continue working on the guidelines with the goal of hopefully finishing this next year. If you're interested in joining our conversation, there's a link to the mailing list at the bottom of the slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Next up, the collaboration continues. We got Dave Jones.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Jones, the co-chair of the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster, along with Karen Moe. Our session was a 3-hour session that included some awesome speakers and participants. We had Ed Kearns from the First Street Foundation, who spoke on wildfire risk data, Heath Hockenberry with the National Weather Service's wildfire program, who addressed evolving wildfire services, Everett Hinckley from the U.S. Forest Service's Office of Geospatial Management, and our own Sean Huang, our ESIP fellow, presented some of her research on wildfire smoke and COVID-19 health impacts in California. We had Jonathan Bruno, CEO of Coalitions and Collaboratives, whose boots on the ground really assist communities to become more resilient, and David Green, NASA's Wildland Fire Program Manager, and Maggie Glasgow briefed us about NASA's disasters program. So our key takeaways from this session, which was greatly attended, it was a lot of fun, revolve around trusted information needs to be identified and delivered to communities and responders. It's not really being done today very well, and our efforts are helping to make it more efficient. So in addition to climate change is really changing fire behavior. It's outpacing our models, and mega droughts are affecting actions on the ground. This comes from a U.S. Forest Service wildfire report on the Tibbetts fire. So I want to thank Sean Huang, our ESIP fellow, for 2 years of excellent support and expertise. She'll be rotating off at the end of November, but we'll be getting her PhD by the end of the year. So congratulations, Sean. We're really proud of you. And that's Sean presenting actually on the right side of the screen, and Karen Moe next to her engaging the audience with a lot of conversation. It was really great. So please join us the first Thursday of every month at 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's when the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster meets. And the winter meeting will be talking about trusted data post-wildfire and how that can support decision-making applied to communities and responders. So that's it. Thanks.
All right, next up, we're continuing the air quality conversation with Beth Hufford.
Can you hear me? Okay, so yeah, so we're interested in developing a toolkit for people who want to understand air quality, especially in local communities, and what it means to them, right? So we're thinking about an audience that is not scientists, probably people that don't want to look at data. So we're really interested in this idea of going from data to knowledge that can be action guiding. And we had a small but lively discussion in our session about what kinds of tools communities need in order to get that kind of information in front of them. We did a short survey of people at the session just to ask them questions like, what do you think about when you think about air quality, and turned that into a word cloud, and health was prominently displayed in the middle of that word cloud. So people are concerned about the impacts of air quality on their health. And so our toolkit is aimed at, providing information for people. One of the really interesting takeaways for me from this session was in asking Karen Moe, who's been involved in her own community quite heavily, looking at how to get air quality information to community members, and looking at the impacts of plant development and factories that already exist that are polluting the air. And she noted that as people get access to this type of information, they become more engaged with the problem, right? So we recognize that there's a feedback loop here that can be really important for getting communities engaged in new information. And so we're still looking at how to create this toolkit, but we have gotten some really great ideas from our session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, so next up, Madison Langseth is going to talk about giving credit where credit is due.
Great, thanks. So the goal for our clusters session, and I should say our cluster being the Research Artifact Citation Cluster, the goal was to understand existing challenges with assigning and recognizing credit for research artifacts, so things such as data and software, and establish next steps for the Research Artifact Citation Cluster with respect to improving credit for research artifacts. So during our session, we heard stories from 5 participants about mechanisms and challenges for assigning and recognizing credit. And then we asked all the participants to tell us their challenges and their resource needs regarding credit using sticky notes and flip chart boards, as well as Jamboards online. And 2 major needs emerged from this activity. So the first, that project teams need guidance about how and what roles to assign credit, and that this guidance isn't out there, so it needs to be developed. And second, that the research community needs tools for visualizing and gaining insight into the PID graph. In a follow-up meeting with cluster members, we established that our cluster should really focus on improving kind of social guidelines as opposed to developing technical solutions. That's kind of where our expertise lies. So that means that we will likely be working on developing some guidance related to our first takeaway. And we'll be doing that in our subsequent cluster meetings. So if anyone is interested in helping with this effort, please join our cluster. There's a link there at the bottom of the slide. Thanks.
All right, thank you. We're jumping next to Steve Diggs and talking about AI for science.
And it's going to be me and Shana, and I believe Shana is going to go first.
Yep. Hi, everybody. So we were talking about conversational AI for science, and this is a subset of AI to use natural language processing, and really explaining to the audience the difference between using traditional search, which uses metadata and keywords to find information with a direct one-to-one match, versus natural language processing, which can understand the context or the intent, and so can understand much simpler language. It can understand the semantics, can understand synonyms. And so it can really help bridge the gap between non-scientific users or different communities that might have different terminologies for things to try to help make data more discoverable. So definitely, linking into some of the other sessions and some of the challenges that are occurring across different communities in terms of making data open and accessible. So we really kind of dived into how NLP could be useful for that. And I demoed our Navteca tool called Voice Atlas, and we did some experimenting with how quickly we could find information using Voice Atlas as NLP versus, just sort of a traditional looking through with search. And then that was the first part of the session. And then Steve challenged some of the ESIP community to update their wikis and really make sure that the information in that knowledge base was up to date, because obviously that's a challenge as well, as if you're searching for something but the information itself is not the most updated, then that itself needs to be fixed. So I'll pass it to you, Steve.
Thanks, Shana. And I'm outside. It's Ocean Hack Week out here. So boy, that happened really fast. Anyway, so we challenged the collaboration areas through the ESIP fellows to update that information. And we'll be showing that information really soon. If you're interested in joining us, join the data stewardship call on the Mondays of each month, second Monday of each month. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. So next up, we'll be talking about the teacher workshop, which was happening simultaneously along with some of the other workshops. So take it away, Carla.
Hi, we hold an annual teacher workshop every year in conjunction with the summer workshop. And this year, as in many years, our goal is to get teachers to use earth science data to explore phenomena via different types of data. Before I just talk about a few of the highlights, I would like to recognize my co-facilitators, Margaret Mooney, Shelley Olds, and Becky Reed were instrumental in helping to put on this workshop and in setting it up, et cetera. So some of the takeaways here, well, first of all, just take a quick look at the map and you'll see that we had coast to coast coverage, which is pretty exciting, of teachers participating from the West Coast in California all the way to New York, and then from the South in Florida up to the North in Minneapolis. Those were the virtual participants. We made a very concerted effort to have a hybrid workshop. We had 23 participants, 4 were in person, 19 were online, and we had a meeting owl there to kind of connect those two groups and try and make it more connected. 2 teachers did receive Funding Friday awards from this, and we were very excited about that. In the future, we want to work a little bit more on our advertising. We definitely got the group that we were recruiting. We got sort of certified earth and environmental science teachers, but the use of earth science data in K-12 is much broader than that. Last year, we had a much catchier title, Earth, Wind, and Fire Using Data in the Classroom. This year, I think the title kind of may have excluded some of the elementary and middle school teachers that we might have got. So we're going to work on our marketing more for next year. The 4 in-person participants, partly that was simply due to the fact we surveyed them, and many of the teachers said this is about convenience. So anyway, if you're interested in joining us, you'll see you can come to our meetings. It's on the slide there. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Next up, we've got Jenny Hewson talking about our new open science cluster. Oh, Jenny, are you fully unmuted? I know you said you might have some sound issues, so let's do a quick. Trying to ask her to unmute, but that doesn't seem to be working. Jenny, how about we will keep troubleshooting with you and maybe have you sign out and hop back on, and then we can try again. And then we actually have 2 videos that we can play, so we've got a little bit of time to help you troubleshoot the audio. Are you ready to share the videos, Annie?
Yes, I am. Please tell me if you have any issues with sound once this starts playing.
Hi, my name's Dave Fishman. Sorry I'm not there right now. I'm on vacation. My session was Data's Disruptive Innovation, and probably many of you heard how great it was, and it was probably the best session in all of ESIP. Well, it's true. So you should definitely check out the video because it was really, really good. Had great participation with the crowd. Everybody was really into it. We were asking lots of good questions. But the highlights that I want to get across is they're basically the data itself is going to provide 2 paths to the future. One, where you could become Blockbuster and be out of business. And 2 is where you become Netflix, which is the disruptive innovation that replaces Blockbuster. So I describe how to avoid becoming Blockbuster and the things that you can do within your organization to ensure that you become Netflix as the disruptive innovation by using data and staying in business and doing really well and moving forward. So again, it was a great talk. Everybody had a lot of fun. So check it out. Thanks.
Should we try again for Jenny?
Yeah, Jenny, you want to go ahead and try again?
I'm chatting with her now, so maybe go ahead to the next video and I'll see if I can figure it out.
Okay, great. And this is actually going to carry us into the next part of the highlights webinar here. And this is going to be information from all of our community fellows. And so Sahara is going to go first. She couldn't join us today, so she shared a short video with us.
Hello everyone, this is Sahara Ali, one of the ESIP's community fellow, and the session I enjoyed the most during ESIP's summer meeting was enabling AI application for climate. So there were 3 main goals of this session. The first one was to assess AI readiness of existing climate data sets for AI applications. Second, to collect feedback on AI readiness assessment tools and process. And third, to design metrics to represent the AI readiness assessment. The major key takeaway from this session was that though AI ready data is the need of the hour, it is still highly domain dependent, which means that different end users can have different level of expertise, different sets of requirements, and different needs. In the same manner, different interpretations for the same kind of data or maybe the same data set. So in our case, during the session, we asked users to evaluate the data sets, and the same data sets got scores as low as 1.5 and as high as 10 point something, which also means that great care needs to be taken to curate data sets to keep them generic enough to serve a variety of diverse users and also specific enough to satisfy their exact requirements and needs. This also means that a much needed next step is to design a primer to explain the concepts and possible strategies for datasets and their evaluation. Thank you so much.
Great. Very nice to hear from Sahara. So we're going to loop back around to Jenny. Let's go ahead and try our open science session again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Fantastic.
Wonderful. Third time is a charm. Well, thanks so much. I'm Jenny Houston, and I was a co-organizer of a session called Building a Thriving Open Science Community, along with a cohort of other folks. And really the kind of three main aims of that session were to convey the importance of embracing open science, and really to highlight kind of the potential growing pains for initiatives, projects in that development. And I will talk about that a little bit. And then the main part of the session was this interactive mind mapping activity to really use the expertise of the ESIP community to identify emerging trends in open science. And I think one of the main takeaways was through these lightning talks that we had 6 panelists provide, including Matthew Hansen from Element 84, Avi Benson from the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, Mark Parsons, who spoke about the Research Data Alliance, Cindy Hall from NASA's Transform to Open Science Initiative, and Kurt Hamill from Esri, and finally Ryan McGranahan from Astra Associates. And they provided these different perspectives, and it really highlighted the kind of the need for diverse stakeholder groups in open science. We had these 2 sessions actually. We had one during a conference session and then a second during the Unconference to really try and tease out what are these emerging trends. And what we came out with were kind of these 4 buckets of who to engage, the outputs, tools and collaboration, and then the social factors. And you know, Alison, I have thought that somebody's phone keeps going off, but that's actually a timer, correct? Yes. Okay. So if you want to learn more, my contact information, as well as the Open Science co-lead's contact information, Cynthia Hall, is down on the right. And we actually have our next telecon coming up next week.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. We appreciate you hanging in there. So we're going to circle back around to our community fellows. And Sarah, you're up next, and Jake, you're on deck.
Hi, everyone. This is Sarah. I'm a community fellow with the Semantic Technologies Cluster, and I was with the Discovery Cluster last year, so I've been lucky to be a fellow for 2 years. And my favorite session this past ESIP meeting was a use case for federated knowledge graphs. It was amazing to see progress that people from the usage-based discovery have made over the past year. And I just highlighted a few of the major takeaways from that session on this slide here. Basically, it was a really nice summary of different initiatives that groups from various organizations are leading to link different types of scholarly objects, namely publications and data sets. And there was some really great work that NASA presented, for example, to track the bibliometric impact of some of their research data sets. As a fellow, I felt like I also learned quite a bit about different bibliometric resources like Crossref and Scopus that offer APIs for retrieving citations, which will help me with my research. And it was also really inspiring to see how alignment is kind of happening across different ESIP groups in order to facilitate knowledge graph traversal. And finally, I think going forward, there's going to be more work coming out from this group on some interesting projects. For example, to possible projects on building things like data set recommendations, as well as being able to better understand data usage across organizations. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in this topic just to join the conversation on Slack. There's a #knowledge graph channel on ESIP that's pretty active, and I really like hanging out there and contributing to that conversation as well. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And I popped in case anybody isn't already on ESIP Slack, there is the link in the chat. Jake Giron is up next.
Hey, thanks so much, Allison. So hi all, my name's Jake Guerin. I'm a fellow this year for the EnviroSensing cluster. I'm a second-year PhD student in geomorphology at Indiana University, and I came to ESIP first as a lab PI, but stayed on this past year as a fellow. So like it says on the slide, this was my 5th ESIP meeting, but my first one in person. And the Pittsburgh meeting crystallized for me what people seem to love about the organization, which is the collaborative and generative environment there. It was really wonderful meeting my cohort of fellows. We all gelled pretty well, and I know that some scientific collaborations are likely on the horizon between some of us. We laughed and debated and got to know each other, which was a great substitute for the Zoom box faces. My favorite session was on the last day. It was an overview of the projects associated with the Cloud Pathfinders program. I honestly just really enjoy the technical details of data engineering. And while I might not be optimizing Lambda functions at scale, knowing what is and is not feasible with regards to kind of the bleeding edge of earth science data delivery is pretty crucial for my own research and planning. And as a result of that session and one of the Unconference sessions, I was reminded continually about PANGEO, which I still need to try, and introduced to QHub by the session leader and QHub team member, Rich Signal. QHub is ESIP's scalable Jupyter Hub environment that's run on Kubernetes and allows users to deploy and maintain these really simple kind of cloud-hosted data workflows. And I've had it pulled up for some time since the conference, and I'm looking forward to trying it out. You know, the field of earth science really is so integrated across disciplines that the variety, velocity, volume of the data is quite staggering. I know this isn't new for anyone. But for an academic researcher, knowing the ins and outs of full stack DevOps is kind of a lot to ask, which is why these projects kind of like PANGEO QHub are so crucial. And I can imagine few places outside of ESIP where those ideas are able to be generated and supported. So yeah, so I just wanted to emphasize how great the week in Pittsburgh was, getting to meet everyone in person, and looking forward to doing it again next year. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Jake, and thank you to all our presenters today. This is just wow, right? It's a really big community-driven event every time the ESIP community can come together, even when it's just all of us virtually. So many of the report outs that you saw today were given by different ESIP cluster and committee chairs, and these are all volunteer leaders, and they're really our champions of ESIP, and their contributions to the community just cannot be understated. So thank you to all of you folks. And if anyone else is interested in stepping up and also volunteering and becoming an ESIP leader, each year the ESIP Partner Assembly elects a new slate of leaders for many positions. And today we have with us Sarah Ramdeen, who is the chair of our nominations committee, and she's going to fill us in a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Allison. One thing that I really took away from the July meeting was how much everyone seems to cares about engaging in different aspects of ESIP, and that could be in contributing to discussions in a session, that could be contributing to a project or outcome through the clusters and committees, and many other different forms of giving back and engaging. And one aspect that I'd like to share today is the opportunity to become a leader within ESIP. As you can see here on the right of the slide, we have a number of leadership positions that are elected within ESIP. Elected officials serve for a year and have the opportunity to run for a second year. Those range from positions like president or vice president to chairs of select committees and then membership on the board. So why serve? There are lots of reasons to serve in volunteer positions. For one, it helps provide an avenue for you to give voice in decision-making and how ESIP operates our goals and missions. And that could be on a large scale as ESIP as an organization, or on a smaller scale on the activities that a cluster or committee is focused on. It's also an opportunity to share your skills and give back to the community. Perhaps that might be in mentorship and leading efforts and organizations and steering new members in how they engage within ESIP. And one area that I like to highlight often when I meet new people within ESIP is that it's also a place to develop your soft skills. This is very valuable for early and mid-career professionals where they might need to get experience leading a session, leading a group, making decisions, reporting back out. It's a nice space to be able to have those and get back from, as I mentioned earlier, that talent other people are sharing in their own mentorships to those in those positions. So I'd like to invite any of you to consider either nominating someone or volunteering for a position. If you follow the QR code or the link at the bottom, you can see a description of each of those positions. And if you don't feel like you're ready yet to volunteer to be in one of these leadership positions, perhaps instead consider joining the nominations committee and helping to do that recruitment for those who might serve in these positions. And that is another way to give back that might be less of a commitment. We're looking for type 2 and 3 representatives as well as early career. So reach out to me, my email's on the slide. We also have a nominations email address, but I'm not sure if it's active right now while we're still setting up the committee. But if anyone has any questions about what it's like to serve, what the requirements are for the positions, what type of skills we're looking for, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to everyone who serves on the committees, the board, and as our cluster leaders. So thank you again to everyone who contributed today. Before you go, since you are still a captive audience, we've got just a few things that we would like to point out for various ways to engage with ESIP. These are also good ways that if somebody asks you about how do I join ESIP, there are many moving parts. And so these are some of the ways that you can point people to joining and expanding our community, sharing the love. So ESIP is active all year round. So we do have these 2 meetings, but we are active throughout the whole year. And anyone is welcome to join. You do not have to be from a member organization to participate in ESIP. ESIP is an organization of organizations, but our volunteers can come from anywhere. So you don't need to RSVP for any of the calls that we talked about today. You just need to go to the ESIP community calendar. You can find that on our homepage at esipfed.org as well. And you can also consider applying for ESIP lab support. So this is some of the pilot projects. If you want to talk to Annie Burgess more about that, she is our ESIP lab director. And keep an eye out. We will be having an RFP coming out this fall for the next round of projects. And if you want to be the first one to hear about that RFP, then you should probably sign up for our newsletter, and I'll give you a QR code for that in just a second. We also, if anyone is part of an organization that would like to become an ESIP partner, we do have a process for that. We've got an application process, and then we have a committee that actually reviews all of our partner applications. And so you can apply or encourage others to apply to become a partner. You can also encourage others to apply to become a community fellow. Community fellows are definitely part of the beating heart of ESIP, and they do so much behind the scenes, both at the meetings and throughout the year with our calls. So definitely, help out ESIP by helping us find our next round of fellows. And as Megan pointed out in the chat, yes, the new call is going to be coming out in just a couple weeks. And again, if you want to find out when that actually drops, you should sign up for our email newsletter. So if Annie, you hop over to the next slide, you can sign up. We've got the QR code here, or you can go to esipfed.org/subscribe. You can also find out more about our meetings, the collaboration areas. We've got more than 30 of them now, and the ESIP lab, which is where that RFP will be coming out. So thank you all very much. It's been a joy to spend some time with you today and to hear a recap of everything that's going on. So we want to take one final moment to thank our federal agency sponsors. That's NASA, NOAA, and USGS. And we thank you for your attendance and participation. So this will be coming out on the ESIP YouTube channel shortly. Thanks, everyone.